Recording started. Let me just do like 30 seconds. Basically, today we're going to just for all our international audience. These are our coordinates for the Zoom. Every Tuesday, 8 o'clock Israeli time, 1 o'clock US time. Today is Wednesday, as an exception to the rule because yesterday was Purim and everybody probably was too drunk to pay attention. So we're doing it today as an exception to the rule. I sent a note for everybody with like 13 questions of the preparations, and I made a reference to the previous discussion we have on the type of government Israel has, America has, ancient Israel had, a little bit of basics about the types of government, a current problem or questions or challenges we have in Israel with the judicial system. And David Moran will give us today a presentation. He gives is 14 minutes presentations on basically what exactly this crisis is. And it's my letters. I'm not going to repeat my letter here. I said, how much do we know? What exactly the crisis? Do we know facts or just emotions? What would happen if the reform passes? What disadvantages it will give to people who are against it? And if it doesn't pass, what disadvantages it will give people who are for it? So pluses and minuses, and David tried to put it from all perspectives, try to fairly describe the problem and give us information to what is going on. So with that, here's Bob. Bob, welcome. I just did quick introduction. So you have to review that portion when you review the tape, but basically welcoming David to give us presentation of current crisis to separate rumors from reality. And with that, this is my 2 minutes over, and I give after 12 minutes, David, I'll give you 2 minutes heads up. Go for it, David. The stage is yours.
Okay. I don't think I'll actually need the 12 minutes. Okay. Because yeah, I thought, you know, we discussed that I'm going to have 10 minutes, and I thought it was pretty enough. So the thing that popped into my mind, I think either last week or maybe the week before, like 2 weeks ago, is that in one of our conversations, Jonathan said that the United States is not a democracy, it's a republic. And then I saw a video of this guy on YouTube named Charlie Kirk. Maybe you have heard of him. He's a public speaker, a conservative public speaker in the United States. And it was a very short 1 minute video like they post on TikTok. And it was a video where he says to someone else, well, no, the United States is not a democracy, it's a republic. So it was the second time that week that I heard this phrase. And so I decided to finally do my little research and see what exactly is the difference between a republic and a democracy. And then once I understood that, I said, wait a minute. We are basically in a struggle here in Israel right now between a republic and a democracy. That's exactly what's going on. Because what Aaron Barak did in 1995, so like I said, in 1992, there were two new fundamental laws passed. The law of the what we call the one is the freedom of the freedom of Chofesh Haisuk. How would I put it in English?
Occupation.
Right, the freedom of occupation.
Job,
and
work.
The other one is the basically law for human rights and the human dignity. Kvod ha'adam v'chiruto. The freedom and human rights of a person. So these two fundamental laws, 3 years later, were interpreted by Aaron Barak and other 9 judges on a case that involved the Israeli Bank HaMizrahi, Mizrahi Bank, against someone, I think Bank Mizrahi versus some kibbutz or something. And it was by then, and I think until now, the largest verdict that the Supreme Court has ever written. It's a 500-page verdict in which they basically express their idea that those two laws are like a constitution or are de facto a constitution. it was a verdict of 10-1. So the one judge actually didn't agree, but the other 10 agreed. So it was a case where you had 11 judges sitting. So it was, I guess, quite a serious case that came to the Supreme Court. They needed 11 judges to reach the verdict, and they've reached a huge, almost a complete majority of 10-1. So so when I thought about it, the difference between a democracy and a republic. So I will just say it briefly. I guess Jonathan and Bob know this. So like I don't think I'm so to all other people who see this video and still didn't get it, just like I didn't, exactly got it like until a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So a republic is a form of government where you have above all else you have a constitution. You have a document which is above all. So it's basically the rule of law. And republic comes from the Latin phrase res publica, so the interest of the public. So all the citizens of the republic are equal in the face of the law, and the government and the parliament cannot make any legislature which conflicts with the constitution. So in that case, the minority is protected by the law. And so, like they say here in Israel, well, what happens if some member of Knesset or the government brings up a law that says that all redhead people should be killed, or all redhead people, cannot vote. They lose their right to vote, or they lose their all their human rights, right? A redhead, of course, is just an example for a group of people. And this is what people claim here against the reform. So in a republic, that would not be possible unless the constitution itself is not very into human rights, because Iran is also a republic. It's a Muslim republic. I don't know how it is in South Africa, but South Africa is also a republic. I guess they have some human rights issues there. But basically, a republic is the rule of the constitution. The constitution is above everything. Democracy is not a republic. Democracy is the rule of the people by majority, and the people they basically vote, and very simple. If what the majority wants, that's what you get, and the minority cannot do anything about it. So in a classic democracy, if the majority decides that all redhead people lose their human rights, then that's the time for the redhead people to flee, because the majority doesn't want them. Israel is not a classic democracy. This classic democracy was, of course, was in Greece. That's the way it was. They directly chose their representatives to that ancient parliament, and then that parliament would bring its legal or legislative proposals to the public, the laws that they wanted to pass, and the public would vote. What is the public? Is the eligible citizens, those who have the right to vote. Not everybody had the right to vote. If you were an eligible citizen and you had the right to vote, you would vote, and then the majority would win, and that law would pass. Now, Israel is a liberal democracy. It's not a republic, and it's not a classic democracy. A liberal democracy would be basically that the democracy itself, basically under its own, I would say, under its own control, or under its own concept, basically keeps the rights of the minority. So the minority is protected by a law, but basically, if something happens, that law can be canceled because it's still the majority, the rule of the majority. So it's a kind of an in-between thing between a republic and a democracy. And so what Aaron Barak did in 1995 with the verdict of the Bank Mizrahi is basically he turned the entire judiciary of Israel to start interpreting the laws as if we are a republic. Without these two fundamental laws, which gave him the basis for the interpretation, the members of Knesset who brought those laws up and those who voted for it, they never meant that these laws would have a constitutional status. They were not voted as constitutional laws because there was like maybe 30 or 40 members of Knesset present at the time of voting. If everybody knew that they were voting for a constitution, I guess all 120 members of the Knesset would be there. That's this very important thing. I mean, look what's going on. We have an entire chaos in Israel now. So this was not a constitutional voting. This was not a very like important thing. They didn't present it as if a revolution is going to happen because of that. But that was the interpretation of Aaron Barak. Maybe he personally always wanted Israel to be a republic. I don't know. But basically, since 1995, the judiciary acts as a republic, and the other two branches of our democracy, the government and the parliament, they still act as a democracy because they never heard the news that we have turned into a republic. And now, well, we reached the peak. We reached the peak because people here, most Israelis, maybe all of them, we are used to a democracy. We're used to the fact that the majority votes, and the majority, basically, the vote of the majority becomes the accepted policy or law. We are used to the fact that once we choose a parliament and a government, they would form the coalition, and we don't have a midterm election for the parliament like they have in the United States, where a Democratic or a Republican president can meet a Congress that is that has a majority of the other party, and they would give lots of problem to that president to implement his policies, the things that he promised to his voters, to the people who support their party. And so, of course, that would not be would not be a democracy. These checks and balances, they basically balance democracy out. And so, I would say that from like, if I would try to be really objective, although I do support the Levine-Rothman reform. I think that the situation has to be brought back to the way it was before 1992, or at least before 1995. But I do think that you see here the real fear of the Israeli left from what you could call the mob rule, because one of the fears of the people who oppose a classic democracy is that it turns from a democracy into a dictatorship because of the mob rule, because of the majority, what the majority wants, the majority gets. And so the danger is that you get a mob rule. And so to balance that out, I guess we came up with this idea of a liberal democracy, a democracy that would be, on one hand, the rule of the majority, but on the other hand, at the same time, would not infringe of the rights of the minority. And so this is, I think, the essence of the clash that we see now. But I never heard on the news or in any article that I've read, and I'm reading a lot also on the Israeli websites, I'm on Twitter, nobody says the word republic. I think I don't think they really know what they're talking about in this. They know what they're talking about, but they're not expressing it to the point, which I think this is the point. And so that's basically what I had to say. So that's it. What do you guys think about it?
I would love to know, you're talking about mob rule. I might have to get to the airport 5 or 6 hours ahead of time because tomorrow the mob is going to shut down the railways and the traffic from Nahariya to Beersheba, in apparently legal demonstrations, but it's a total disruption. And as far as I'm concerned, call me out if I'm wrong, but this is, I mean, it's really sour grapes. The right, or the right in Israel, never made demonstrations of this size, or this caliber, or this much disruption for any of the actions done in the last 3 years, even though some of those actions were, in my estimation, despicable. So where does that leave us? Because it looks like mob rule right now. Looks like anarchy.
I agree with you. I only said mob rule in the way that I think the classic philosophers who opposed democracy, they warned from that the classic democracy could lead to a mob rule. But I actually agree with you. I agree with you. And not even in 2005, you didn't have people were thrown out of their homes in Gush Katif. And what they did, I was very disappointed, by the way, personally. But what they did is, instead of fighting the soldiers and policemen who came to take them out of their homes, they hugged them and they cried on each other's shoulders, as if it was some kind of a reunion of people who haven't seen each other for 200 years. So you're absolutely right. They are in total panic. They lie. They mislead. They spread disinformation and misinformation, and they say whatever comes to mind. There's not going to be music because of the reform. There's not going to be television because of the reform. There's nobody will able to write books because of the reform. I mean, it's crazy. Crazy, absolutely crazy. They say everything they can to say that because of the reform, that will not exist anymore in Israel. There's not going to be business. There's not going to be economy. Everybody's going to take their money out of Israel. And they don't understand that like most democratic countries in the world are completely the way Yariv Levin wants it to be. Like, I don't remember if you tell someone, and I actually did yesterday. I went to a pub for Purim to drink and have some fun. There was a very nice guy there, and I actually told him this, the difference between a republic and a democracy, because somehow a discussion started. He said, I didn't know that. I said, of course you didn't, because everybody talks about the United States as a democracy, where it actually is not. The majority doesn't have the power the majority has in Israel. And on the other hand, New Zealand, they are a classic democracy. Well, I would say a liberal democracy. They don't have a constitution. Just like Israel, by the way, they have 120 members of parliament, and their judiciary system cannot, by law, dismiss or cancel legislation made by the parliament. It's impossible there to do. Impossible. And Israelis want to immigrate to New Zealand.
It's a nice place.
It's a very nice place. I mean, if sheep could vote in New Zealand, then that would be the mob rule of sheep. There's more sheep than people.
But also during COVID, New Zealand and Australia were some of the strictest laws, and they shut the country down so completely that it could take a decade to recover economically.
And not only that, they actually arrested people for speaking. They arrested people for saying, I don't want to wear a mask. They arrested peaceful protesters. They infringed the right of people to protest in these great democracies. I saw the pictures coming from Australia. In some cases, I was completely shocked. I was so shocked. They beat people. They beat a pregnant woman who was against, who was against wearing a mask, and she didn't want to take a vaccine or something. They beat her up on the street. It looks like China. It looked like China. And I don't think they canceled these rules or laws. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. But I don't think they will. It's like a precedent. If you can do that on COVID, you'll be able to do that on almost anything.
Well, take a look at what happened in Canada when Trudeau went after demonstrating truckers and went in and closed their bank accounts and got them fired, got them unable to actually get access to the savings that they had. It was so diabolical. It made me ashamed to call myself a Canadian, which I am. I'm not American.
Yeah.
David, what do you see as the similarities? Yeah. David, what's the similarities between what's going on in Israel and what we experience here in the United States? Do you like the far left in the United States is very violent, very anti-American. Do you see that amongst what's going on in Israel?
Absolutely.
What's their goal?
Well, again, because they don't use the word republic, their goal, I think, is you have to remember that they are funded by Zionists, and whose ultimate goal is to make Israel what we call in Hebrew Medinat Kol Ezracheha, the state of all of its citizens, which means, in other words, not a Jewish state. Israel turns into a republic, theoretically, okay, where all branches, when we theoretically, if we actually change the regime from a liberal democracy to a democratic republic, so you probably would have a constitution, and the rights of all the citizens would be the same, which they are now, basically because it's a liberal democracy. But if it would be a republic de jure, right, then it will lead to a situation where the Jewish majority is going to be in danger. And that is a danger. First of all, it will be a political endangerment of the Jewish state. And then, I guess in a few decades, it will be a physical danger. So they basically want to sow the seeds of the beginning of the end of a Jewish state, because basically that's where it leads to. And so when you think about it, basically Israel cannot afford to be a republic, in a way. If you get my where I'm trying.
David, I'll just say it's very nicely you kind of dissected it into really like political science concept, democracy and republic. I never thought about in these terms. My guess is I'm not sure. My guess is that most people that I know, like people on the street, people I just what they don't know that level of difference. And most people, regular people, the guy who works in a gas station, the guy who is just in a sandwich shop, the guy, when they say democracy, in their mind is like fairness. Democracy, if everything is nice and good and respectful, it's democracy.
Yeah.
So the question I'll ask, and then I put in my 13 questions for you guys before I send it out, everybody got it, is, well, if I'm not making a statement for or against, but theoretically, let's say the Arabs in Israel, let's say we will democracy as a, and I'm not against the left or right, but I'm saying if, for example, will be democracy in a common understanding of the guy on the street. It's democracy, whatever, it's fairness. So if we have to have, for some reason, let's say Arabs will have more children than Jews, and after 20 years, we might have 11 million Arabs and 6 million Jews. So if democracy, they go and vote. Let's say the Jews all have to move to Cyprus. Well, democracy decided we all have to pack up and go to Cyprus. It's fair. I mean, that's what people said. Or only Arabs will be in army and Jews will not. And that's 57%, again, 39% vote, and it happens. So I don't know, and I don't answer for that, but I'm a little bit disappointed that because I think I have a feeling that like the people from today in our discussion, I would venture to guess, hold the views of more conservative, if you will, more to the right, for lack of better words. And I wish that in this case, some people from a left and from a left side would come. My note went to a lot of people about our discussion. In the question, 13 questions, I said the questions, for example, one of the questions, is it okay to kill the innocent people? And normally people who are pro-democracy, no, you can't shoot on people. And I did make an example. The plane with 300 people is making a dive into a Pentagon or in Eiffel Tower. And you know for sure that there's a bomb on it, maybe even a nuclear bomb. And it's going to hit the ground in about 5 minutes. Can you have an F-15 send and blow it out of the sky? You can say, no, there's a 300 innocent people. There's only 3 hijackers there. You cannot do it. How do we act in a situation like that? Do you say, well, I have to blow it out, but you just kill innocent people. So the question, can you kill innocent people, is not very simple to answer. It depends. Sometimes you have to protect maybe entire globe. So in our club, guys, the Perplexed Club, we always pride ourselves that we're not confrontational against one view or another view. And I'm trying not to be. I'm just expressing a little disappointment that, yes, when I notice when the right, so-called right, and so-called left clashes, then the right, let's say we will be more on the right, so to speak, we'll continue discussing. And if the opponent brings up a point that makes a good point, I personally can say, it's interesting. I have no thought about it. I guess you're right. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it. Thank you. And I'll continue debate until I understand it fully and I express myself and let another person express themselves, no matter how opposite. And after we have this debate, we'll turn around, we're going to have a cup of coffee and have lunch together. But I just noticed that people on the left, if discussion comes in to this point, like I asked this question a little bit, the person comes to the point and says, well, you know what? If you feel like this, don't bother. Turn it off and just leave. And there's no debate, no conversation. So this today was an opportunity that many people knew to come and calmly say, well, David, Lev, Bob, Karen, Jonathan, you guys are mistaken. And the reason why, in my view, is such and such, and present the view and stay for the whole session and express the view. Nobody bothered to do that. So, and then when we finish our session, I'm sure many people will say, well, you guys completely wrong. You're so screwed up, you don't understand. You're Nazis and you're fascists and you're this and you're this and this. Well, why didn't you tell it to my face? Why do you have to say it when the session is over? That was the time to calmly explain. That bothers me, that people don't have the guts just to come and express their view.
But, well, one thing is that I think we can all agree, or almost agree, that they cannot make a point. That's one problem. The left is now mostly in some kind of a bubble where their moral, they have this, they feel a feeling of moral superiority, and because they feel that, they don't have to explain anything. They're just better. They're better than you. They don't have to explain anything to you. Who are you? You're just a baboon, a fascist baboon who understands nothing and is going after a populist leader. You know, you're nothing. You don't read books. You didn't read Marx. You didn't read Engels. You didn't read I don't know, Simone de Beauvoir. You didn't read you don't read this type of literature. I would be surprised if you can finish reading an entire sentence that has more than 25 words in it and understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually quite surprised at I look a lot at Quora because I find some of the threads interesting, and just in the past couple of weeks I've seen more and more of how wonderful China is. Just what a great society and modernization and civilization, and everybody is happy and fulfilled and equal. And I'm thinking, where did you dream this up?
Well, I'll tell a short story. When I was in Russia, I was born in Russia, in Ukraine, actually. I remember I went to school in St. Petersburg, Leningrad at the time. We had a lot of students from Finland. Finland was more liberal at the time, and Soviet Union wanted to have foreign students, but not really extreme Americans, but Finns. So they come in, and I remember my roommate, Finns guy, had a girlfriend, and he was very communist. But we had a good relation, have fun. We're going out drinking together. We're in college and all of that. And his girlfriend comes in, to visit from Helsinki for a couple of days, and she had a problem with her watch. And I remember when we met her at a railway station, she comes in at the statue of Lenin, because statue of Lenin was all over the Soviet Union. And she comes in and says, Lenin, Lenin, this is Lenin, this is. And she was also probably 20 years old, like me, well, like young guys. Lenin, okay, I said, so yeah, Lenin, that's Lenin's statue. Okay, we also have a statue of Marx and Engels, all this stuff, and we learned it in school. And she was very happy. She was going like, I'm in Russia, I'm in Soviet Union, I'm in socialist countries. This is so nice. Well, I'm so glad. Now she's coming there for a week. Then she will go back to capitalist Helsinki. So it's not going to stay in Soviet Union, but she's so happy how great the country is. The next day, her watch didn't work. She said, Lev, I need to fix my watch. Something working. I said, well, we can go to a watch repair shop and go to that. So we'll go to the shop, and we're standing in line, like maybe 40 people in line. There's 3 windows. And she's in line and still just chirping how nice it is. We're talking and moving the line. It takes about maybe 20 minutes. And we got to the window. The guy closed the window and says, okay, it's all. You have to come tomorrow. I'm done. I have to go somewhere else. And she like, what is going on here? What's going on here? And I said, this is communism. He can do what he wants to do. There was an end in 5 minutes in this line of her being a communist. So that's why there's a joke that who is a conservative? Conservative is a liberal who had been mugged. Once you experience it personally, you all of a sudden it's not such a rosy thing. Try to live there for more than 3 days on a visit. I'm sorry. I obviously went to the maybe a conservative view of the world, but I wish there was somebody here who was like you said that they will come in and say, no, you're wrong. Lenin was good. Cuba was fine. Cuba is a paradise. Look, Cuba by America is so nice. They have a rule of law and everybody's equal. Well, why don't you go there? So, well, I don't know because I am living in South Dakota, but in Cuba it will be much nicer if I only want to go there.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that in time, of course, you said that what happens when the demography of Israel changes. You have more and more Arab people. We don't know what's going to happen because sometimes I hear conflicting statistics. Sometimes saying that Arab women give more, have on average, right, on statistics, they have more children. Sometimes you have statistics that they actually have gone down in their rate of reproduction, if I can say that. But in theory, whatever, let's say in theory that they reach like sort of equality in terms of the amount of people. So it really would not be really as important whether we are a democracy or a republic, because then, as far as I believe, the clash is inevitable. It's going to happen. They will not give up, and the first chance they have, they will go against the Jewish people and the Jewish state, and they will riot, and they will kill, and they will massacre, and they will.
Well, how would the people on the
there is already
left...
an almost independent state in the Negev of Bedouins. They have more guns and ammunition than I think any. It's like probably like the drug cartels in South America multiplied in 2 or 3.
Well,
David, and it's all around us, Lev. It's around you and me.
In the group that is against reform, are there any like Orthodox, Hasidim, Haredi that also?
No, not even one. It's an almost an all secular. You might find some light religious light people, Masorti maybe, who have.
Because I was looking at some pictures and I maybe I missed it. A lot of people demonstrating. I didn't see anybody with a kippah.
No, you won't.
I know, but maybe I just missed something.
You won't. And by the way, I see so many videos that they say the most horrible things about right-wing people and also about Mizrahi people, Sfaradim.
Yeah.
You guys came from Morocco. You don't know anything. They represent the political correctness of the academia, right? They are politically correct. They should not be allowed to speak like that.
This is what it seems to be conflict is between, like you mentioned, republic versus democracy. But from a people standpoint, again, I think it's basically, that's why I didn't know if any the religious people were, again, because I think like this, for people on the right in Israel who are for reform, they basically say this, if I never, the Talmud says never be so sure of yourself. In other words, people who go with the keeper, we always have upper authority. I'm not the ultimate authority. There's always something about me. Torah and God. People on the left,
they don't have that.
This is just my view, and I don't need to get any arbitrarily authority. This is just right because I know it's right. So when you have a situation like that, how you can find a common denominator to agree on something if you have a completely different basis of beliefs?
Well, in the United States, the Democrats are anti-nationalists. They don't believe in the concept of a nation state. And it sounds like the arguments in Israel are exactly the same. The people who are rioting, the people who are blocking the roads don't believe in a nation state. They live in a complete fog as far as I'm concerned. I think from what I've read that the Arab population is growing very slowly in Judea and Samaria. I think the birth rate among Jews is much higher at this point. So I think the dynamics are going to be that, maybe in the next 20 years, Israel will be 50-50 in the Jewish population, between the Orthodox and the secular community, and the Arabs will be a minority. I think that's where it's headed. That's what I've read over and over again.
I would just add one thing for the 2 minutes we have left. I just make sure I'll be remiss not to mention. This is a note now to whoever will be watching this video, if it gets posted on the YouTube, like this. Anybody who doesn't agree with the expressed view, with the views expressed here, you're welcome to come anytime on our show, on our conferences. This is our Zoom ID, and this is our password. 325-804-5811, password 285775. Anytime, even we happen to talk next week, we do it every Tuesday at 8:30 evening, Israeli time, or 1 o'clock American time, US time, Eastern Standard Time. So if anybody watches this view and says, you guys are just conservatives to the core, you're completely missing everything. Nobody asked me, I didn't know about the meeting today, I would have spoken. So you'll have a chance any week on Tuesday to come in our show and interrupt whatever we have been talking about and express your view and correct it if you see where we're confused and misguided. You have a chance. Sir, ma'am, who are listening to us on the video, you have a chance to come in and express your view nicely. You're not going to be criticized. You're not going to be called names. Nobody here today called any names. We just expressed our views and just not understanding what exactly the logic behind the blind people who are against it. I want to know without being 30 seconds, guy.
The final thing I will say is this: everything that's going on basically leads to the fact that they cannot accept the elections, the result of the elections. Perhaps. And this is one of the most important things in this country.
And this is a democratic way to protest and burn railroads.
Yeah.
Wow. Gentlemen, ladies, Karen, everybody who's listening, have a good time. Thank you for a great presentation, David. Okay, take care. Have good travel. Shabbat shalom.
Bye-bye.